Can y'all hear me okay? Is it? Okay, very well. Tonight, I'd like to begin with just inviting you to join me on a short thought experiment. Let's say that just for yucks, that one of the ways that you like to get your jollies is to infiltrate the monthly meeting of the Hood County Democratic Party, just to be a fly on the wall, just to observe and listen what goes on. And let's say on this particular monthly meeting, Adrian Martin decides to invite this, where is it? Put him up there. The guy that they're going to show you here on the screen in just a second, to give a presentation to her comrades on abortion. The man we're, again, going to see on here, his name is Dr. Willie Parker. He has a board-certified OBGYN with over 30 years experience. By his own admission, he proudly admits that he has personally performed over 10,000 abortions. He also claims to be a born-again, Bible-believing Christian, and that abortion is his ministry given to him by God to serve the underserved women in his community. Back in 2017, Time magazine did an interview with him. And here's about a short 2-minute clip. See what you think.
My epiphany or breakthrough to provide abortions came about while listening to a sermon by Dr. Martin Luther King. In that sermon, he described what made the Good Samaritan good. And in substance, what made that person good was to ask, what will happen to this person if I don't stop to help? So I became more concerned about what happens to my patients when abortion care is not available than what might happen to me for providing the care, even though I knew that many people who shared my Christian identity wouldn't agree with my decision to do so. There needs to be the deconstruction of what I call the false equivalency of the whole pro-life, pro-choice rhetoric. That's a misnomer. There is pro-abortion and anti-abortion. People who are anti-abortion are pro-fetus, but that often leads them to be against the lives of women. To be pro-abortion, which I am, is not abortion should happen because it is a good thing. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a biologic reality. But I am for women having access to the services that they need. So we'll have to reframe the conversation and have an honest disagreement, which means that we'll have to deal with facts. People who oppose abortion say life begins at conception. That's a non-biologic understanding, because when we look at how pregnancy occurs, conception occurs when a sperm meets an egg. You can't have a live pregnancy if you don't have the live sperm meeting a live egg. And so if the sperm's alive and the egg's alive, that means that life begins before conception. Life is a process and not an event. You can't answer religious questions with scientific answers. You can't answer scientific questions with religious answers. I think Dr. King said it best, that science gives mankind knowledge, which is power. Religion gives mankind wisdom, which is control. The two are not enemies.
So, what are your thoughts on this? I know my first thought when I saw this was, this is not some blue-haired fish hooked through the lip radical leftist eco-feminazi college activist. This is a highly, highly trained and skilled medical professional with more knowledge and experience of the human body than any of us in this room. But you catch what he said, though. You cannot answer religious questions with science, nor can you answer scientific questions with religion. Is he right? Is that true? Is the answer to the question of when does life begin, is that actually a religious question? Well, the Texas Democratic Party platform certainly thinks it is. You can go look it up for yourself. Under the title of Religious Freedom, it explicitly states, quote, that the determination of when life begins is a religious doctrinal issue that is viewed differently by different religions and denominations. You know, to today's culture, what he is saying just sounds right, or at least somewhat plausibly acceptable. Within that, though, herein lies the crux. Would you, as that proverbial fly on the wall, know how to stand up in front of everyone and in front of Dr. Parker and say, with all due respect, Dr. Parker, you are wrong and here's why you're wrong. And be able to do it without making an appeal to your emotions, feelings, or to religion. Well, that's what we're going to do tonight. We are going to learn how to make the case for life on very hostile turf. How to make the case for life on hostile turf without using the Bible. Before we get too far ahead, firstly, a disclaimer. I can already see several eyes burning through me with their Homelander laser beam eyes with the unspoken objection that, Craig, you do not have a uterus. Translation, you have no voice in this issue. Well, you know what? Right up front, I am not going to say for one small moment that this issue of abortion is not emotionally and psychologically charged. It is. That scared little 14-year-old girl who just finished whizzing on a plastic stick and now sees a pair of blue lines staring her back at the face has just realized her life has changed forever. She now faces rejection from her parents, her friends, her boyfriends, the taunts and bullying at school, and shortly she will be the talk of the town on social media. She is being faced with tremendous pressure that no one should be forced to bear. And frankly, if you or someone you know is in that position, I'll just admit right up front tonight, a lot of what I'm going to say probably is not going to resonate all that much. See, a woman who finds herself in that position, she doesn't need a moral lecture, and she certainly doesn't need a philosopher. She needs care, compassion, a shoulder to cry on, someone to walk alongside her throughout that entire pregnancy to either prepare for motherhood or to put the child up for abortion, like Kim's group does. It does a fantastic job and has for 3 decades. It is wonderful.
You said abortion.
Well, the fact is that even though that abortion can be emotionally and psychologically charged, morally, it is very, very, very simple. Whenever there's a discussion about abortion being had, regardless of where it is, there is one and only one question that has to be answered, and that is, what is the unborn? What is the unborn? Christian apologist Greg Kokel simply states it. If the unborn is not a human being, then no justification is ever needed. However, if the unborn is a human being, then no justification is ever sufficient. So until that question is answered with the capital T type of truth, you know that truth our culture absolutely hates because it's a truth that applies to all people in all places in all times, whether we like it or not. So before answering the question, one thing that might help us is we're going to do what's called framing the argument. Let's give it some perspective. What are we talking about here? Let's say you've finished up dinner time, you're cleaning up dishes, washing in the sink. Your 5-year-old son or grandson comes in behind you and says, Mommy, Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, can I kill this? Now remember, your back is to them. You don't see what they have. What should the first question out of your mouth be? Yeah, right. What do you got? You know, cockroach, snail, fire ant, earthworm. Hey, I don't care. You know, just don't tell Mom. Neighbor's kitty. Hold on a second. Little sister by her throat. Back the train up, take it off the tracks. Time for some counseling. We now have issues. No, you would never in a million years say, sure, son, just go for it, without first answering that predicate question, what do you got? So now that we've framed the question, let's go ahead and answer it. So how do we objectively answer that question? What is the unborn? Well, we are not going to turn to the Bible for 2 reasons. The first reason, of lesser importance, is the question of what is the unborn. It's what's called an empirical question. What is it? What do you got? Let's go back to the kitchen scenario. About 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, you're going back out in the kitchen, turn the lights out, batten down the hatches, getting ready to go to bed, and all of a sudden you hear a crash of garbage cans out in your carport. You run over, you flip on the light, and since our phones are permanently and surgically attached to us 24/7, you manage to click off a few shots, and you see that you got a picture of this cute little fuzzy furry family of ring-tailed butts scooting out the back. And you want to know what it is that you just saw. Would you go to your Bible? No, I mean, you might go to National Geographic, possibly Google Images, or if you're just lazy like I am, you just ask Siri, right? But the more important reason, newsflash of the day. Did you know that our culture hates the Bible and certainly rejects the Bible as any source of authority? If there is a town hall meeting going on and there is a moral issue, such as abortion, being discussed, and you start quoting the Bible, you will be instantly tuned out as one of those wacko buffalo-headed J6 or Christian nationalist wacko nut jobs, and you will have no voice in the public arena. So what we have to do is we have to frame the argument in terms that the other side, they cannot wiggle out of, or at least say, well, that's just your opinion. So, to that end, let's take a cue from our recent past, shall we? Let's trust the science. Just follow the science. Trust those experts. Okay, Dr. Franken Fauci, let's do that. Since the discovery of the DNA molecule, the question of when does life begin is no longer a matter of opinion. It is incontrovertible science as much as the law of gravity is. We'll turn to the long-established science of embryology, which is a course that is required of every student going to medical school to be a doctor. And basically, that is the study of the developing human from the point of an embryo to childbirth. And what is so cool is every one of these embryology textbooks at the core, they all say the same thing, that at the earliest moment of development, meaning conception, the unborn is a distinct, living, and whole human being. Let's take a moment and unpack that. Distinct. Distinct in the sense that although baby may be renting an apartment from mom in her womb, the embryo has different everything than the mother. It's not a part of her. Has a different blood supply, different blood type, DNA code, and more often than not, a different gender. Translation, my body, my choice does not apply. Whole in the sense that every part needed to build that baby is contained in that one-celled embryo. Not like a car that's put together piecemeal fashion on an assembly line. You start with blocks of metal, you weld them together, glass, leather, rubber, what have you. It's all in there. And living in the very profound sense that dead things do not grow. So now that we've answered that, this now leads us to the question, how do we value human life? How do we value human life? You know, science tells us now that the unborn are human beings, but science cannot tell us how we ought to treat the unborn, any more than it can tell us how to treat toddlers, teenagers, adults, the elderly, the infirm, the handicapped, anything like that. Science is a tool that can only tell us what is. It is beyond its capacity to say what ought or what should, because those are philosophical considerations or moral. So now this raises our question, what makes us equal? What makes us equal? Folks, it does not take a PhD in rocket surgery to see that we live in a culture that is absolutely, positively obsessed with equality. Economic equality, racial equality, marriage equality, gender equality, income equality, social equality. You hear it all the time. But you know what the problem is, though? That world out there has no real answer. If I ask my lovely wife, what kind of value do I have? She's going to give me an answer. If I ask my ex-wife, What kind of value do I have? More than likely, I'm going to get a different answer. And if I ask a biologist, what kind of value do I have? He's going to go, let's see. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, 9 trace elements in that order. $1.98, give or take. So the answer that the world provides out there of what kind of value do I have only can point down to one thing. It all depends on who you ask. So in terms of the pro-life worldview, we can now narrow our question down even further. Does each and every human being have an equal right to life? Or do only some have it in virtue of some characteristic that none of us share equally, and that comes and goes during the course of our own lifetime? And folks, there's only 2 ways to answer that. Either option A, humans come to be at one point, but only become really valuable in virtue of some acquired characteristic, like self-awareness, self-consciousness, the ability to feel pain, something you can immediately exercise. That is, humans aren't really valuable in virtue of the kind of thing that they are, but only some task they can perform. And no extra charge for this. That option right there, that is the foundational worldview of every man-made ism that has ever come down the pike. Communism, Nazism, fascism, socialism, Leninism, they all say, what can you do for the state? But I digress. Option B, the only other option we have, is that humans are valuable in virtue of the kind of thing that they are, not some task that they can perform. And it's true, that we as human beings, we do differ tremendously in terms of our talents, accomplishments, goals, dreams, desires, what have you. But we are nonetheless equal because both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence say that we share a common human nature that bears the image of our Maker, and our right to life comes to be when we come to be. Pro-life advocates contend there is no morally significant difference between the embryo you once were and the adult that you are now that would justify killing you at that earlier stage of development. Issues of size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency are not good reasons to say you had no value then, but you do now. Let's take a moment to unpack that. If you remember the acronym SLED, I digress a little bit. In the back, I came in a little late. I put out some handouts, so everything that I'm sharing with you, I've got on handouts. Just go ahead and grab one. Everything is on here. Size. That's true. Embryos are smaller than newborns and adults. So, why is that relevant? Do we really want to say that larger people are more human than small ones? I mean, generally men are larger than women. Does that mean men have more rights? Size does not equal value. Level of development. It's true that you're less developed as an embryo, but 6-month-olds are less developed than teenagers, both physically and mentally. And if we have any teenagers in here tonight, or teenagers at heart, this may come as an absolute shock to you, but you are not as developed physically and mentally as your parents. A 2-year-old's reproductive system is nearly as mature as a 21-year-old's. Does that mean the 21-year-old has a greater right to life? Environment. Where you are has no bearing on what you are. If I stand here, take a tube of blood and analyze it, a human being. I stand right here 5 feet away. Take a tube of blood. I'm still a human being. So if that journey of 4 or 5 feet doesn't do anything, can someone please tell me how a journey of 7 to 8 inches down the birth canal changes the essential nature of the unborn to something we can kill to one we can't? If the unborn are not already human, merely changing location makes them valuable. And finally, degree of dependency. Sure, you depended on your mother for survival, but since when is depending on somebody else mean we can kill you? I mean, there's diabetics that are dependent on insulin. There's kidney patients who are dependent on dialysis machines, and then doctors and nurses to run them. And the politically incorrect statement tonight, sorry, not sorry, we all know that there are millions of lazy, able-bodied generational welfare recipients who have absolutely no intention of ever getting a job, but are dependent on you and me to work extra hard so they can have their next new iPhone, their nail job, their tattoos, their beard, smokes, and lotto tickets. Just as I disagree with that kind of lifestyle, it doesn't mean that I have the right to go kill them. So then that leaves us now. What is our duty then? Yeah, so what? What do we do? It can be stated in one sentence. It is to love the unborn and his or her mother. How do we love our unborn neighbor? Simple. We just stand up and speak and defend him or her wherever and whenever we can. Let's go back to the example we started tonight with Willie Parker. How would you call out the fallacies that he was talking about without looking like some kind of nut job? First, you relax and you realize that it's not you doing the fighting. The capital T, truth, is doing the fighting. Knowing this first, you can be calm and at ease to respond. Some of you might remember back in 2015 when our country was wrestling with the same-sex marriage issue. CNN showed up on our doorstep on the courthouse lawn. Y'all remember that? Looking for anyone who was either crazy or foolish enough to go in front of a camera, in front of an international audience, to say why they were against same-sex marriage. Folks, it's no secret that Austin is rapidly becoming as blue as LA and New York. And knowing Abbott, whether you like him or hate him, will not be governor forever, nor his administration. It's a foregone conclusion that CNN is going to be back on our doorstep again, this time to get our 2 cents worth on the abortion issue. But this time, you can now be armed and ready to be able to speak. You got your phone there? You want to pull up the timer on it? Or the stopwatch?
Sure.
Right.
Oh,
Okay. I want to show you how to, I guess for lack of better words, give the 60-second Bruce Lee response. You know, in those Bruce Lee movies, he's sitting there having coffee and a bunch of bikers or whatever comes to mess with him, and he ends up mopping the floor with him, and he goes back to what he's doing. I'm going to show you a tactic. It takes about 10 minutes to learn it. Very, very simple. CNN is on courthouse lawn. There's a camera and a microphone in your face. Why are you against abortion? Here is what you are going to say. You ready? Go. Mr. Cameraman, here is why I am pro-life and why you and everyone watching this broadcast ought to be pro-life too. I am pro-life because it is morally wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. The science of embryology definitively states that at the earliest stages of development, you are a distinct, living, and whole human being. And you know what else? There's only 4 things that separate you from the embryo you once were to the adult that you are now that would justify killing you back then and not now. Issues of size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency are not good reasons to say you don't have value then, but you do now. Stop. How long is that?
41 seconds.
41 seconds. I'm getting a little rusty. But anyway, with that, how many Bible verses did I cite in that? None. Did I communicate the truth though? Oh yeah. We gave them something to think about. So how do we love the unborn's mother? As Kim pointed out previously, over 40% of the abortions performed are done so on women with prior abortion history. And you know why they're having repeat abortions? It's because that first one never got fixed. And I know I told myself tonight that I was not going to preach, but I tell you, if I stop here, all we've done is just shown the atrocity that abortion is, and we've condemned one mother with no way out. While secular reasoning, or worldly wisdom, if you will, might be able to show that abortion is unjust, it can do nothing to restore a guilty soul. Dr. Phil may tell you just have to learn to forgive yourself. And frankly, that's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. And the problem goes far, far deeper, starting with the fundamental fact that you and I, we do not have the authority to forgive ourselves. That post-abortion woman feels guilty. She feels guilty because she actually is guilty. Guilt is to the soul what physical pain is to the body. We can ignore it, justify it, minimize it, medicate it, try to shove it under the water like a beach ball, hope it will stay, pretend nothing's wrong. Or we can listen and seek restoration. And we would do well to listen. And before I start polishing my halo and pointing fingers, we must realize we are all guilty. We are guilty because every one of us in this room is what the Bible calls a sinner. And folks, there is only one hope for sinful human beings, indeed for all of us in this room tonight, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because that gospel puts us all on a level playing field and says we all have an extremely big problem, far, far, far bigger than abortion. You see, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he climaxed that creation with the creation of mankind. He created us to worship and enjoy him, and he provided for every need we had. While he was doing that, we said in our hearts, while shaking our fist at him, "I will not," and chose to rebel and go our own way. At that point, God had every right and would be fully justified in judging and condemning us for our rebellion and spending eternity separated from him in conscious eternal torment in a real place that really exists called hell. But, that word but, it's not his desire that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. He sends his son Jesus to bear the punishment that you and I so richly and rightly deserve, so those who repent of their rebellion and place their faith and trust in the sacrifice of Christ alone are completely forgiven and cleansed. In other words, your sin and mine was placed on someone sinless who stood in our place, condemned and bore the full wrath of his Father that we rightly deserve. God did that so adulterers, liars, thieves, blasphemers, cheats, post-abortion men and women can be welcomed into the family of God as dearly beloved children. And folks, that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you.